realizing that trust is the key to getting your new patients to stay, pay, and refer. If you'd like to know how to earn your patients' trust literally overnight, you're in the right place, because that's exactly what you're about to discover, and we're starting right now.
And now, Amazon #1 best-selling author, Dr. Tom, the Gems Guy, Orant.
Danny Bobrow is the founding executive committee chair of the American Academy of Oral Systemic Health. He has a BS in economics and 2 MBAs, one in finance and one in marketing. I've known Danny for the better part of 3 decades. He's one of the smartest guys I know in dental marketing. Danny, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate your coming on.
Pleasure's mine, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity.
Danny, one of the biggest problems, and I hear this routinely from dentists, is they need more new patients, but not just more new patients, but specifically more new fee-for-service new patients. So my question to you would be, what can they do to really make that happen?
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. And, in a perfect world, everybody wants their, most practices, I think, they wouldn't want to have to deal with a mix between PPO and fee-for-service patients. But, just logically speaking, there's 2 ways to do it. One is to change the existing mix by educating your patients and just letting them not just working toward a point where you've earned such a degree of trust, and the relationship is so cemented that when you choose to get off the program, if you're not already on it, that they, in a reasonable percentage, choose to stay with your practice. And the other is to just do aggressive outreach into the community to attract people and let the messaging sort of self-qualify the people, so that, for instance, having an offer in your messaging that somebody who has a PPO that you're not interested in participating in might not respond to, because maybe they already get that as part of their plan. So it's really a 2-pronged approach. Obviously, you can't. We've yet to find a way that you can just target people who do not have insurance. But the idea is to target people in your community, and in general, this national statistics show about 50% of the patients have some form of dental plan coverage. Those percentages vary a little bit by country. In fact, in the New England, where you are, it's a little bit higher. It's like 55, 57%. But in general, you send out a message that encourages people, that makes them want to be a part of your practice. And yeah, you're going to get calls from people that maybe you're choosing not to participate in their plan, and in that case, you thank them for their time. But in general, if you're going to have a plan, then there are some that are worth participating in and some that aren't. I think that, and again, in the Northeast, that's not so much the case, that they're very popular or beneficial. But that's pretty much it. You attract people with the message, and then as you cement the relationship, you can choose to get off the plan. We've had a number of participants who've gone through what we call a delta exorcism, for instance, and it usually winds up working pretty effectively. Just depends on the relationship that you have with your patient.
I love a couple of the things that you just said, and I want to circle back to them just real quick, so that the dentists who are watching this, so that you guys can really pick up on some of the gems that he just said. One of them was, he doesn't just message, you don't just send out an advertisement or marketing that messages, you should come here, you meaning somebody who doesn't have insurance, but the messaging can actually be written such that it actually repels the people who you don't want. And Dan Kennedy, one of my marketing mentors, was really big on that, which is, you don't just attract the people you want, your message should actually repel the people who don't fit your model. It's not perfect, but you also added in that the relationship building, and so that once you do get to a point where you want to jettison, or I say dump, a PPO, you can do that effectively. So what are some of the key determinants? So Dennis, how can they be most successful increasing new patient flow using marketing?
And it's funny, just to cap off that point you made, when we do a paid search, which sort of answers your question too, there's many ways to attract people. And, I like to say that marketing is more like fishing than it is hunting. Have a lot of lines in the water, and you can attract patients through many different tactics. But when you're doing a paid search, a pay-per-click campaign, you can bid for terms, But you can also have negative keywords. I'm sure you know this, where people that are searching for Medicaid or Medicare, Medicaid, or whatever the public health program is in your particular area, if that's not something you choose to participate in, then you can be sure that your ads don't appear for people that are searching for those terms. So it's a nice way to keep things focused. As you said, it's not perfect, but it's getting better all the time. You know, we like to say that to grow your practice, your web presence, as well as your conventional marketing, they need to take AIM, which is, I know, a self-serving term, but it stands for 3 necessary criteria to be successful. And let's just speak about your website for the time being. It needs to attract, that's the A. It also needs to impress, that's the I. And it also needs to motivate, and that's the M. Attracting is all about getting people to your website. But once they're there, they need to be favorably impressed with the looks, the aesthetics, the function of it, and it needs to render for optimal viewing, regardless of the device being used to access it. And then most important and most often lacking is that it needs to motivate the website visitor. And I think the reason that most websites fall short in this regard is that most web designers have come to this game from a website design standpoint as opposed to a marketing background.
Yeah.
It's important that you understand the mindset and where the first-time website visitor is in their search process. Are they kicking the tires, or are they a trigger puller, or are they at some point in between? And so that's really vitally important that your website be set up to, just as you communicate with your patients, you want to run the race at your patient's pace. You also want to run the race at your prospective patient's pace. And that means providing them with a means to connect that's comfortable for them. If they're ready to pull the trigger, then simply having a telephone number prominently displayed or a request an appointment or schedule an appointment form is great. At the other end of the spectrum, if they're just starting to gather information on what's really a very important decision, like maybe all on 4 implants, you want to have an easy, short form they can fill out, which invites them to receive a special report on the topic of interest. And then once they receive that, they get enrolled into a lead nurture campaign or a drip marketing sequence. And I know, given your background, you're only too well aware of this, Tom. And then for points in between, you want to have a chat feature, because maybe somebody's interested more than just getting a report, but they're not quite ready to pick up the phone and call you. So those are, in general, the framework that you need to be successful in marketing.
You know, you and I, so many good points there. You and I spoke about the fact that we have so much to cover that we're going to be doing multiple videos, we're going to have you back on multiple times, and that's got to happen. And even when we're just starting to talk in a little bit of depth now, there are so many micro topics. So for example, what about all those people who came, looked, were interested, but didn't do anything? And so then you can get into retargeting. How do you bring them back, and how long would you retarget? How much money would you put in, depending on whether they clicked or whether they looked at 2 pages or whatever? You talked about an easy way to make it for somebody to either chat if they have a question and they want a live person chatting with them, or a forum if they just want more information about something and they don't want to chat with anybody. So a couple of options there. You also mentioned a really good point, which was maybe if your marketing was about all on 4, maybe you don't want them to land on your website, which is the whole thing where they've got too many options and too much confusion. Maybe you either have a separate funnel, which is just a 1-page kind of a Russell Brunson, like just one place to slide down through and it's all about all on 4, or you could do a hybrid where it's your website, but the landing page isn't the home page, it's the all on 4 page. And that way, at least the first thing that they see, and then you can A/B split test that, whether to send them just to the funnel or you send them to the web page landing on the all on 4 or whatever it was you were marketing, and then giving them options for others. And in the A/B split test, you see which one brought you more patients, which one brought you higher value patients.
That's right. Well, you know, the more steps you ask someone to take, the fewer people are going to take them.
Yeah.
And again, following on the paid search strategy, that's absolutely right. One excellent way to waste a lot of money in paid search is to have all the clicks go to your homepage. If somebody has expressed particular interest in implants, they need to go to your implants landing page. And to your point, there needs to be a funnel that speaks primarily, if not exclusively, about implants, the various ways that they can transform a person's life. And if I could just back up too, because we talked about taking aim, and now we're really focusing on the M, which is wholly appropriate, because that is where I see the most opportunity for growth, if you will, with most websites. You also want to make sure that they're impressed, and I didn't want to. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the importance of video. But we're really big on video, and it's funny. Some people are a little concerned about it because they think, well, I got to bring in a crew, and that's expensive. Got to interrupt my practice flow, and that's true if you're going to do a custom video, and there often is. That does make sense to do, but you've also got other types of video. We're big on animated procedure video, and we offer that because that's a wonderful selling tool. You can send a spouse who's going to go and talk to their spouse about a procedure. You can send them with a link to the video that explains the procedure, for instance. And then one that is really close to my heart that I love coaching health partners, as we refer to our clients on, is patient testimonial videos. And what's great about those is that if you embrace the 9-step process that I offer, you can be guaranteed a steady stream of these really good as gold videos. And the reason they're good as gold is that not only do they provide social proof and help connect people who are interested in you or who become interested in you by hearing from a third party about how great you are, it's also a wonderful SEO tool because, as you know, Tom, Google, to its credit, is always adjusting its algorithm to get more in line with what the real user experience is. And so one thing that they're looking at more and more closely is how much time does a visitor spend on your website? How engaged are they on your site? Do they navigate to different pages? Do they create or do they perform what's called a conversion, either calling you or filling out a form? And a great way to keep them on your site is with patient testimonial videos. The fact that Google owns YouTube is not a bad thing either, because when you do those videos, not only should you place them in context-appropriate locations on your website, but that should be uploaded to YouTube, and it should be optimized, which means it should be named, titled, and described appropriately. And you can work wonders getting even yourself ranked in a community that you may not even be located by using liberal mention of the fact that this patient happens to live or work in this adjacent community. So it's a little more what they call Google juice. The reason people don't do this is that they fail to view it, because everyone seems to get the inherent value of this, but not that many dentists do it. And the reason is that they don't view it as they do their clinical protocols. If you want something down, you need to have a process. And I locked myself in my office for a weekend to just figure out, well, now, why weren't my clients, my health partners, doing this either? And I realized they didn't have a protocol. So we came up with a 9-step protocol. And, time doesn't permit me to go through it today, but it's a guaranteed success. And you need to invest in, like, maybe a wired microphone, and that's about it as far as technical. You don't even want these to be too well polished or produced because they lack that sense of authenticity. And so just using your iPhone is all you need to do. And so that's one way to really help attract people too, because as I said, it's a great SEO tool, and it's something that Google really embraces.
If that's the only thing that a viewer, if a dentist just got this one gem out of what you're saying, what we're saying so far, that was huge. The concept of having video testimonials on your either website or specific funnel landing page, either way, it's huge because when somebody can hear and see somebody as opposed to just reading and seeing a photograph of the person, reading testimonials is great, but the emotion comes through, and if you can get them right after they saw something for the first time, the reveal of the veneers or the reveal of the all-on-4, and you get that emotion, and it's not as you say, it's not a custom-produced studio video where you've got a film crew in there and they're getting No, it's real. It's like a reality show. The person just got the veneers done. They look in the mirror for the first time, and your assistant has the video going, and they asked them ahead of time, is this okay? Can we do that? Oh, yeah, I'd love to. And you get that. And I've seen wonderful videos where they're crying. And as the dentist, when I used to do a lot of major aesthetic cases, and when I did the major aesthetic cases, truth be told, I was always a little bit concerned that for that first moment that they're looking in the mirror, you've just done a case that's $20,000, $30,000 in the first look in the mirror, and they start to cry. And my concern is, are they crying because they hate it, or they're crying because they're tears of joy? Of course, hopefully most of the time it's tears of joy. One more quick point. You said something else I don't want to miss. You said something about, let's say they're doing all on fours, and that video is about all on fours. Well, that's the most appropriate video testimonial to show on your all on fours, either funnel or all on four subdomain or page of your website. So when somebody clicks on that ad and they want to know about all on fours or porcelain veneers or whatever it is, then at least the first 2, 3, 4 videos on that page should be exactly what they were looking for. So really,
the real power of this, Tom, if I may, just briefly, is that you have an opportunity to really precisely target your various audiences. And one of the steps in the 9-step protocol is to select good candidates for video. And it's not the people that are the best looking. It's people who match your geographic, demographic, and procedural profile. So what you want is you want a demographically, geographically, and procedurally diversified portfolio of videos. So you go down the list and say, well, what pages do we have on our site? What services do we really want to promote? To whom do we want to promote them? Are we a family practice? Do we have ethnic groups we want to connect with? Are there certain geographies that we'd like to connect with? Well, those are the criteria. You go through your charts, and then when you call and schedule the next appointment, say, Mary, we love you as a patient, and we'd love to have more like you. We wonder if you'd mind saying a few words on camera during your next appointment. See, because the best surprise is no surprise. I'm just giving a little insight into the 9-step process. The biggest complaint I would hear is an excuse, really, for people not doing the videos was that, she would have been perfect, but we were running out of time. And or her hair wasn't the way she wanted, and which we can relate to, right, Tom?
Not for a long time.
And so, right. So you want to anticipate that. You're going to get a little pushback. I don't think I look good on camera. No worries, Mary. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. But it would be great if you could just share for 1 minute about who you are, how long you've been a patient, why you like being here, and whether you think or why you think people would be happy to join us. And then I'll give you another little clue. When they come in, you set up the camera and say, all right, let's just do a dry run. And turn the camera on and don't tell them.
Yeah.
And then they go through it and they say, okay, that was great. We're done. Well, what do you mean? Are we going to do it? And I go, no, we just did it. And they go, you little sneak. Yeah. But the fact is, as soon as that red light goes on, people freeze up. So, I don't think anybody will object to that.
I love the dry run idea, because then it does take the jitters out of people who are uncomfortable on camera, which is a lot of people. One of the phrases that I had our team in both of my practices say to a patient before asking for this kind of a testimonial was, Mary, could you help us help another patient? And so that's all they said was, can you help us help another patient? Well, what patient who loves you, who's getting really amazing work done by you, who has a good relation, what patient is going to say no? They're going to say, well, yeah, of course. They would in fact always say, well, yeah, sure, how can I help? They would ask, what can I do? If it was after the fact, let's say impromptu, they just started to say amazing things about what they had been through. So maybe it wasn't even the moment you were putting the veneers in, but it was a follow-up visit where they came back and said, I just got to tell you a story about, I saw my cousin Bob, who I hadn't seen for 10 years, whatever. At any point, Cialdini talks about in Influence, he talks about these points of highest reciprocity where a patient is just gushing about something. Immediately, that's the time to get the testimonial, is when they're at their point of highest reciprocity. So there are various points, and I'm sure you cover a lot of this in your 9-point system, which I think is phenomenal.
A big student of Robert Cialdini.
And I want to drill into, pardon the pun, but I want to drill into that more on another video. You and I have discussed the importance of understanding new patient acquisition cost, lifetime value, what's the average value of a patient in your practice, ROI, return on investment. So tell the viewers, if you would, a little bit more about, first of all, why is it so critical that they maintain this information? And also, I love your phrase, I think you call it actionable intelligence for your marketing plan. Talk about that, if you would.
Absolutely. It's vital that you have benchmarks, criteria against which you're measuring progress and success, or lack thereof, because objectivity is what it's all about. And it's so often the case that the phrase return on investment is bandied about. And if you really wanted to ask someone to define it for you, they might have a hard time doing it. Return on investment is simply return minus investment divided by investment. So that's not so difficult. And many people can probably define it or give you the fraction. What's a little more challenging is how do you define return? Because furthermore, I mean, most people can define investment. Every month I write a check to a marketing firm, or I get my bill from Google. I know what my investment is. But how do you calculate return? And return is really a function of what the value of a patient is to you. I know you and I agree and have discussed that it's often stated by people, or there's an implicit belief that, well, you know, there's good patients and there's bad patients, and that's true. But it's really not been demonstrated that the value of a patient has any bearing on how you got the patient. Once they're a patient in the practice, it makes sense to just calculate what is your average patient value. And you can do that on an annual and a lifetime basis. And then the patient acquisition cost is simply looking at how many patients did you get and what did you pay. So your cost divided by the number of patients is the patient acquisition cost. Calculating it's not that difficult as long as you're tracking the source of your patients. And obviously the higher your patient value, the more you can afford and justify to pay. One thing that I like, the one distinction I always like to share is that people often view different marketing tactics as a horse race. And if they are fortunate enough to be gathering data and understanding kind of what the value proposition is, what their patient acquisition cost is for tactic A versus tactic B, maybe you've got paid search and you've got direct mail. And you see that, well, it's only costing me $60 to get a new patient from paid search, it's costing me $110 to get a patient from direct mail. A lot of people will make the erroneous decision that I should stop doing direct mail and keep doing paid search. The real criterion, and that would only be true as if you knew you were going to get the patients from direct mail by continuing to do paid search, and that's rarely the case for the reason I mentioned earlier. It's fishing, it's not hunting. You've got to have different lines in the water. But ultimately, the criterion is what I like to call, well, I didn't make this up, this is from finance. It's to know what is your required rate of return. In other words, how much are you able to justify paying for a new patient? And the only way to know that is to know what your patient value is. And you and I've talked for years that in general, if you could get a new patient for $300, you should be happy doing that all day long. It doesn't mean you don't want to try to reduce the cost of getting the patient. But again, the value, the amount you're willing to pay depends on what's the patient worth to you. And that in turn is dependent upon how extensive is your offering. If you're offering every facet of dentistry under one roof, and you have great patient retention because of your communications and the trust that you've earned through various tactics, one of which I think we'll have time to talk about, well, then you can justify paying more than your neighbor down the street and be very happy about it.
We should have set up like a 3-day video, but anyway, because every time we get into anything, there's so many little such important gems that you're sharing. One of them was something that not just dentists, but I think business people in general, it's a paradox that they don't realize. You mentioned that the average cost of acquisition of a new patient through most traditional marketing in dentistry is somewhere in the $300 range, and we've found it to be $250 to $350. So you and I are right on the same target there. You can decrease that somewhat in some of the digital marketing forms as well, but it's a good number. And I've got coaching members who are happy paying $400, $450, $500 a new patient for multiple reasons. One of them is because those particular members are targeting and doing more high-end procedures. So maybe they're targeting all-on-4, various types of implants. Maybe they're targeting aesthetic cases. Or maybe they're just targeting bread and butter general dentistry, but as you said, they're doing most of the dentistry in-house. So they have a hired gun periodontist, they have a hired gun ortho or whatever, or maybe they don't have an orthodontist, they're doing Invisalign. Point being, couple of the numbers that you need to know, one of them you already mentioned, which is your average lifetime value of a new patient. Another number that you need to know is your hourly productivity for the doctor. And the average, which is not a good number, by the way, but the average that we're seeing in the U.S. is somewhere in the low to mid threes, $350, $375 per hour. If you're up in the $450 to $500 per hour as a general dentist, $450 to $500 is better. But we've got guys who are doing multiples of that, and there are guys who are doing 1,000 or more. Anyway, so I guess the big takeaway from all of this, before I share one more little thing about something that ties into what you said about being willing to pay more, something that Dan Kennedy said. But the big takeaway of this is, as dentists, we were not really taught anything about knowing your numbers. And if you want to grow and be really profitable and serve your patients and your team and your families best, you need to know your numbers. So one more quick point on this, which is you talked about the fact that sometimes it's okay, and in fact maybe even favorable, to be able to pay more for a patient, of course, depending on what you're doing and what your return's going to be. One of the things Dan Kennedy taught us is that whoever can pay the most, and when I say pay, I don't mean just out of pocket, but pay and then get the return. So whoever can afford to pay the most for a new patient, client, or customer is going to win the game. That doesn't mean you want to pay more if you don't have to. It just means that doing bigger, better cases and getting the retention.
It's a measure of your success, exactly. Yeah.
I love the fact that, we were going to be talking about marketing, and you're talking already so much about the math behind it, because you can't be effective with your marketing or your business building without knowing the math. So you and I, we've talked a lot in the past about how important it is to properly or appropriately handle, and I won't call it a new patient phone call, because I think you and I both use the same language. It's not a new patient phone call. It's a prospective new patient phone call. And the difference is they're not a new patient until they show up and sit down in your chair. So having said that, can you share with us what's your philosophy, the approach to ensure the highest potential percentage or number of those prospective new patients who are on the phone are converted into somebody who schedules and shows up and keeps the appointment?
It's all about attitude and mindset. And a great way to remember what the proper attitude is to remember that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And we also sometimes like to say, before you make an appointment, you want to make a friend. And this gets to keeping appointments too, reducing no-shows, because when people cancel, it's mostly because they have no connection yet, which is understandable but not necessary to be the case. People don't like to disappoint somebody with whom they've already made a connection. And so on so many levels, it's what happens in the first phone call will set the tone for the relationship throughout. You're actually part of the dentistry selling team, because you're setting a tone of professionalism and caring that will make it that much easier for your hygienist and the dentist to gain treatment acceptance once they meet the patient, because the patient's already been prepped. But specifically what we coach on in our curriculum, which is called the Art of First Impressions, we talk about the importance of establishing rapport, conveying empathy, exuding enthusiasm, asking the right questions in the right way at the right time, employing aggressive listening technique to understand what's important to the caller, and learning the concept, the distinction between attributes and benefits. So that while it's basically a journey, it's a journey of exploration that you're on with this call. And your goal is to find out what's important to this caller and how you're able to help that caller achieve whatever goal that it is for themselves. But you have to help them reveal it. And really, it's incumbent upon you to get them to say it. Because if you say something, that's one thing. But when the caller says it, it's true to them. So we also have exercises where we show you how to translate attributes into benefits. Because an attribute is just a physical or inherent characteristic. It may or may not mean anything to the caller. And it's like, to me, communicating attributes is like the sound of one hand clapping. It stops communication, or it fails to really create effective communication. But when you tell people, for instance, that we offer salivary testing, and that means that we're able to help identify high-risk oral pathogens that could be life-threatening. So not only can we save you money through prevention, we might even be able to save your life. And then you stop and listen very quietly, because silence is a key selling tool, to see if this matters to the patient, the prospective patient. And you can usually tell just by, if it's silence, then you may not have rung their bell. If they say something like, "Oh, that's really interesting," and it may even cause more conversation. Well, tell me a little bit more about that. Well, now you're in a conversation, and now they've invited you to ask more in-depth questions, because we coach that in our training, the first 5 statements of what we call our Taffy Introduction. Taffy is short for the art of first impressions. They're all closed probes. They're very simple questions, because I contend that you really don't have the right or permission to ask in-depth questions until you've connected with this person on an emotional level. So I like to tell people, use the closed face sandwich protocol for questioning. You begin your communication with closed probes, simple questions that you have a right to ask. May I ask who I'm speaking with? Would you mind if I place you on hold for just a moment to give you my undivided attention? Who may we thank for referring you? Are you in any discomfort presently? And you may notice, not only am I asking the questions, which means that I'm gaining control of the call, which as an expert, you owe it to them, but I'm also conveying empathy, exuding enthusiasm while I'm asking the questions. Because if I'm asking you if you're in any discomfort presently, does that suggest that I'm not just trying to find out if they're an emergency appointment, I'm trying to show them that I care enough to ask. So that's basically a little glimpse into the protocol. You begin with closed probes, then when you have implied or explicit permission, you can elaborate by saying, well, what is it, how can we help you today? Or why have you waited until now to get this taken care of? And then once you've made that connection and you've established the buying signals and you've gotten the person to say, yeah, this is what I want, this sounds great, only then do you move to the details about what insurance do you have, how you pay for this, what day would you like to come in, or do you prefer first available? I think a big problem is that when people get a call from a prospective patient, they open up their intake form, which was written by non-marketers, by the way, people that have, that set up the practice management, and that's a charting tool. That's not a selling tool. So some of the first questions people ask are your name, insurance.
Exactly.
Well, that's a great way to stop communication in its tracks, because if we're going to do business together, the details can wait. And if we're not going to do business together, the details don't matter. So don't start with details.
I've already said this a few times, but each time I've asked you something, you've come back with what really could be another that one topic that you just started to go into a lot of depth into could be an entire video at some point. We probably should do that. It also kind of tickled my memory that one of the things that I did that a lot of dentists aren't willing to do, but if you want to really grow your practice or practices, I did this in my main practice, and with our other practice, we had the other general dentist who we hired doing it, and that is one more step to building that relationship, and everything you said there was amazing. So one more step that we did after that first visit phone call, but before the first visit was to happen, was that the doctor, his or herself, in my case, I did my own, and then our other general dentist did theirs. We call the patient for what I call the pre-first visit welcome call. It's a super short call. It's basically just hi Mary, my name is Tom. I'm the dentist, Tom Orant. I'm the dentist, and I never use doctor. Tom Orant, I'm the dentist you've got the appointment with on Friday. Just want to give you a buzz and say hi, introduce myself, find out if there's anything at all that we can do to make your visit more comfortable. And usually there wasn't, and so if not, just looking forward to seeing you on Friday afternoon. The likelihood of that patient failing without calling you ahead of time and saying, I either need to reschedule or cancel, was slim to none, because we made the calls and the personal touch. And even if we left it on a voicemail, it was still very powerful.
Right. That's huge. And that's another example, sad state of affairs, especially in healthcare communications, is it's not very good. And most people, it's just like I play the how are you test. When I call somebody, I go, they say, hi, thank you for calling XYZ Dental. This is Bill. How may I help you? I go, hi, Bill. This is Danny. How are you? Well, what do you think I hear 95% of the time? Fine. What can I do for you? Right? Instead, if that person, and I do this when someone calls me, I don't know them. Whether you know someone or you don't know them, if someone says, hi, this is Danny calling, how are you? The answer is, I'm fine, Danny. How are you? And you'll be amazed every time I do that. The person, you hear a pause because they're stunned. And they say, well, I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Because nobody ever asks me. All right, so there's just these little simple ways to rise above the crowd. Making a pre-appointment call, having the doctor do that, yeah, is it time out of your day? It is. Is it time well spent? Well, if you value kept appointments and the prosperity of your practice, I'd say yes.
Yeah, it's all amazing. And I by the way, I do the same thing even sometimes on chat. So I'll be on some company's website and I have a question, so I'll go into chat. And so before I ask them my question, if it says I'm speaking with Keith now, I'll say, Keith, how are you doing today? And half of them, it throws them off completely because that's not on their script to answer that question. And the other half, they're human beings who want to build a relationship, say, great, thank you so much for asking, how are you? So exactly what you just said there. I love your phrase, actionable intelligence marketing, how you can ensure that dentists don't fly blind putting out ad dollars. They don't know what it's doing. So if you would tell us, I know you have a marketing dashboard that helps them with that. So tell us about the marketing dashboard. What is it? How does it work? And frankly, why should a dentist even care?
Right. Well, thanks for asking. We've always been committed to transparency and accountability. And until it's really only a year and a half ago, that meant us spending hours every month preparing reams of data and reports, which we tried to be as succinct as possible. But it took us hours of time to generate to fulfill our commitment to being transparent and accountable to our health partners. But we always knew that was time that could be better spent generating even better results. And so we embarked 6 years ago now, on developing this dashboard. And what it is it's a website you can access, and every month you're sent a reminder to check it. And it shows what it called top, middle, and bottom of funnel results. We begin by showing you how many patients were generated and where they came from, whether it was a form completion or a telephone call. We show you what the cost was per patient, and we let you know what your return on investment is, because we just do that return minus investment divided by investment calculation. We also show you if you're doing a paid search, AdWords, a Google Ads campaign with us. We show you what your spend was that month and whether it's optimized. It's called search impression loss owing to budget. So if your budget was $1,000 and we hit that and we see 46% search impression loss, that means that by increasing that budget, we could generate even more calls for you. Our goal is to get that to zero so we know that we're optimal. And there's a lot of other data that's in here, but the other really, I think, most important insight is that, marketing doesn't begin when the phone call is made. It doesn't even begin. It doesn't even end, when the phone call is received. It doesn't end when the appointment is made. It's an ongoing process. But one of the links in the success chain is how successfully your team are doing at converting the calls that you're paying to generate into solid kept appointments. So we also show a team batting average statistic, and that shows you what the new patient opportunities were. And we go to great lengths to scrub the data. So we're not counting repeat phone calls. We're not counting current patients, telemarketers, insurance companies, wrong numbers. None of that is counted. But we'll generate a number of, let's say, 20 new patient opportunities, and we'll show that of those, 8 were converted into appointments. That's a batting average of 400 or 40%. When you consider the fact that these are not cold calls, people aren't calling you because they want to know why the sky is blue, right? They're calling you because they have a dental need, and we've confirmed that those are the only ones we're counting in your denominator. You really ought to be able to convert upwards of 80 to 90% of these calls into appointments. There's really no reason not to, because they're calling with a dental need. It's all in having the skill set and the recognition that you're going to require a different skill set to convert externally generated patients than the patient who just knocked their tooth out and asked their buddy if their dentist is any good. So they call, and basically a machine could convert that call into an appointment. There's really no skill involved, right? Because they're pre-qualified, they already trust you, they're ready to go. So, that's an important distinction to be aware of, I think.
You mentioned the what was the wording that you used for impression loss, where you had basically hit your budget, but you still had 42% of you had a much bigger headroom. What was the word?
Search impression loss.
Search impression loss. So I love that concept. We are constantly looking at, in lead generation, we're constantly looking at how much higher can we go with our budget and still be getting the same or potentially even better return, depending on what the algorithms do. But the point is, as a dentist and a lot of small businesses, we just set a budget and then we just say, okay, that's our cap. And Dan Kennedy and Bill Glazer and many of the guys in direct response marketing talk about you shouldn't have a budget. As long as you continue to want to grow. If you've capped out your growth and you don't want any more money and you don't have any more space and you're open 7 days a week from 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning to 7 at night or 8 at night, and you don't want to build out a facility. In other words, you've capped out your growth and there's nothing else you can do, which, by the way, there's very few dentists who are in that situation. So as long as you want to grow further, then it's really important to look at, well, what did I just miss there? That search impression loss or whatever your modality is of marketing, and how much more could I pay and still get the same or better result per cost of acquisition and average value. So again, it all comes back to looking at the math. Love the fact that you've developed the dashboard. So important. In fact, for many, many, many years, Elizabeth and I, my wife, the engineer, she and I talked about we should have a GEMS dashboard for our members, which goes through everything in the practice, all the KPIs, and shows a lot of the specific ratios that we've created here on Planet GEMS. And a few years back, it took a couple of years because it's all custom, as you know, it's all custom. And so we opened our GEMS dashboard, which does not specifically marketing stuff like yours does, but general practice stuff and ratios that we have here on the planet. So dashboards are amazing. Kudos for you for putting that.
Thank you. I like to think of them in terms of two wings of the same bird, where you've got a CMO bird and a CFO bird, or wing. You need a chief marketing officer component, and you need a chief financial officer component. It sounds like you're handling the second wing, which is great.
And I'm sure you get the same thing from your health partner. I love that term, health partner. I'm sure you get the same thing from your health partners as we do what we call our family members. And that is, the moment they see the dashboard light up, their eyes light up and they say, I've never been able to actually visualize or see, and they use those terms. I've never been actually understand or visualize or see what was happening with my, whatever it is, dollars or spend or whatever it is. Shifting a little bit. You and I are both huge into being students of human psychology, influence, persuasion, Cialdini, and many others. If you could, because this ties so closely into the importance of specifically the offer part of your marketing, talk about that.
Sure. Well, that's a bit of a sticking point sometimes, because doctors and people in general, they're hesitant to be aggressive with their offer. I think the mindset is that, well, if we make an offer, we're going to attract low-quality people. And if you poll your patients who you did make offers to, most of them won't even remember why they came in. And speaking about PPOs, as we did earlier, what would you rather do? Would you rather make a one-time offer, or would you rather be committed to a lower fee schedule for the rest of the relationship? So the point is, everybody responds to offers. I don't care if you're selling Learjets, yachts, or candy. People, when they're qualified, it makes sense to give them a free sample. And when you consider, my brother, who's a practicing dentist, he taught me this. He said, even when you give away a free exam, it isn't free to the patient, because the patient has to spend time, they have to overcome fear or some inertia or reprioritize their schedule to get there. So don't really think that free is free. But that's pretty much all that I want to say about offers. Is that, I had a health partner in Chicago. He used to say, my motto was offer till it hurts, which is what you were saying, is the more you can offer,
yes,
the more successful you are. And what's been most successful, we have a health partner in a northern suburb of Chicago who has a cone beam, and he offers a complimentary cone beam scan for every new patient. It's a $500 value. I can't remember the last time he collected $500 for the scan, but it's a huge patient magnet. No pun intended. Well, it's not a magnet, but it's close.
It's brilliant. And you're right. I've never heard the term offer till it hurts, but the concept I totally know very well, because we have members who offer your first implant is free. And I'm sure many of the viewers listening to this will say, your first implant free? There's no way I would do that. Well, one of the things in marketing is to identify false beliefs of either your potential client, customer, or patient, and in some cases, our own. What are our own false beliefs about what will or might not work in our marketing, in our business building? And one of the false beliefs, you hit the nail on the head, which is there is a very common false belief amongst our dental professionals that is, if I offer, that whatever, I'm not going to even name a number because I don't want to get into dollar value of any specific treatments, but let's say I said, for X dollars you can come in and get a cleaning, X-rays, exam, or for X dollars you can get your first implant for X numbers, whatever, and I do that. The concern, and I understand the concern because I practiced for 22 years in my two practices, but the concern is, if we do that, we're going to cheapen the feel and look of our office, of what the public image is of our office, and we're not a cut rate office. We're not a lowball office. Well, first of all, if you're participating in PPOs, it's exactly what you are. And the sad state of affairs is, if you're in a bunch of PPOs and you're only writing off, and I'm putting in quotes, you're only writing off 15 or 18%, then you're ahead of most of the other guys and I'm using guys for both sexes, male and female. You're ahead of most of the other professionals, because most of the people who are in a bunch of PPOs, where 50% of their practice is PPO or more, are writing off 18, 20, 22, some even 25%. And so it's just nuts. So to go back to where you were, what you mentioned about this belief that it's going to cheapen our practice and people will come in and then they're going to expect, this is the other false belief. If they come in on a special offer, they're going to expect discount dentistry on everything else I do. My Framingham office, my main practice, not the Worcester, but the Framingham office, was in an average blue-collar community. It was not super high-end, but an average, nice blue-collar community. And we would attract people from the Boston hospitals, Mass General Hospital. We would attract surgeons. We would attract people from professors at MIT. I mean, and this is all through we got referrals, but this is all through a lot of aggressive marketing as well. And Elizabeth and I would look at each other and say, a top surgeon at the Mass General Hospital, one of the top hospitals in the country, maybe even in the world, responded to a special offer in an advertisement on the radio or wherever it happened to be. You would think that they would have a network of other surgeons and physicians and so forth that they could ask at the hospital who's the best dentist in the area. But instead, you said it when you said, we are all susceptible and respond to special offers. So they would come in. Go ahead.
One of the mindsets that I try to, in our coaching, to disabuse people of is what I call the self-fulfilling prophecy, which is that when you label anything as undesirable or anyone as undesirable, the quality of your communication will change, and inevitably it changes for the worse. And what I hear happening is, if somebody calls and asks, how much does a crown cost? Or are you in my plan? I try to explain to people that, put yourself in their position, or imagine you're shopping for something that you really don't know that much about. The most common question you get asked is, how much does it cost? It doesn't mean by any means that you're interested in the lowest cost. I'll go further, it doesn't even mean that you're interested in the cost. For those of you who can remember being in the dating scene, it's a foggy memory for me. But when somebody walked up to you in a bar and said, do you come here often? Do you really think they cared if you come here often? No, they're just trying to start a conversation. It's an icebreaker. And I would go further, that when people ask, this is something I want to spend a minute on, if you don't mind, back to insurance, because so many people get tripped up. Someone says, hi, I'd like to know if you're in my plan. And, usually the answer is, well, we are, but we're what's considered out of network. What does that mean? And by the way, notice who's asking the questions here. It's the caller. So you're never quite in control of the call. But setting that aside, because we have the protocol to deal with that. But the main thing to understand is that when someone calls asking you if you're in their insurance plan, I guarantee you that's not the reason they're calling. Maybe sounds a little heretical. But think about it. Do you think that 2:30 in the morning they woke up in a cold sweat saying, I got to know if this dentist is accepting my insurance? No, they're calling because they have a dental need. So as long as you can respectfully acknowledge that question is important, and then through finesse, get it out of the way temporarily so that you can actually find out why they're calling, you're miles ahead. And you can do that very easily. First of all, other people will coach and try to get you to educate the caller on why you shouldn't make your decision based on dental insurance, which is kind of like saying, and now do you mind if I tell you about our practice? And they'll say, yes, maybe. But it's also like saying, well, now I'm going to tell you about our practice, but the thing I don't want you to think about is the pink elephant. All right? They can't think about anything else. So you've got to respectfully acknowledge that that's important, and even acknowledge that by saying, do you have your insurance information? Can you please provide it to me? So now they know you're listening and you're not being evasive, and you say, wonderful, we'll have our benefits coordinator look at this and we'll get back to you to let you know exactly what we can do for you. Now, what's on your mind today?
Love that.
Now you connect with them on an emotional level and find out what's important to them.
Absolutely love that. Everything you just said reminds me of one of my favorite phrases that we share with our coaching members, and that is that the attitude of the seller, which is the dentist, the dental team members, us, the attitude of the seller is far more important than the attitude of the buyer with respect to the likelihood of a sale. A sale could be conversion of prospect to patient in your chair. The sale could be conversion of treatment plan to treatment plan acceptance and moving forward. But it's our attitude. It's how we think about that person. And you're right. As soon as you start pigeonholing them and saying this person won't, well, this person definitely won't, because you're not going to treat them the way that they will.
That's right. And through pacing and proper attitude, you can actually get them to adopt your pace and your attitude, which is your point, I'm sure.
Absolutely love that.
It's important. Yep.
You're a pioneer of, and I've known you as kind of the founder, the grandfather of cause marketing. Sorry for calling you that, but the grandfather of cause marketing in dentistry. So can you tell our viewers really, what is cause marketing?
Well, it's another topic that I'm extremely passionate about, and the reasons are several, but the main one is that it's when it's embraced, it's such a wonderful way to grow your practice. And there's so many, again, we talked about false beliefs. People, when you talk about cause marketing, it's almost a contradiction in terms, because people have been taught to be modest about their giving. I don't want to feather my own nest. I want to give because it's the right thing to do. Well, so do we. But the idea is that cause marketing is a business process whose goal is to advance one or more business objectives, but it's intended to do so only as a consequence of your commitment to doing the right thing, to supporting a socially responsible organization. The benefit that comes to your practice is an unavoidable consequence of that commitment. And I would even contend, in sort of an ironic twist, is that by keeping your good works a secret, you're actually being selfish. Because from the charity standpoint, do they want more or fewer people to know about what they're doing? Do they want larger donation checks or smaller donation checks? Do they want the assurance that this donation will be ongoing over time, or do they want to just receive one check and hope that they get one in the future? And with the cause marketing approach, you can assure that your charity you'll do far better for your charity than you ever could do out of your own pocket or by yourself. So the fact that you benefit also makes you able to be more generous, right? It goes back, the person, you want to be able to donate as much as possible, but you don't want to do it to the point where it's a hardship for you either. So that's the general appeal and approach. And obviously the details are what people need to commit to make it work.
So let's say, actually, let me go in a different direction just for a second. You talked about giving, and obviously you don't want to give where it's going to be detrimental to the business or to your family, but we could all probably give more, and being more open about it and letting your patients know what are your interests. It does so many different things. As you said, it benefits the charity. It benefits the cause that you are so tied into and it's so important to you. It gives your patients either the chance to be part of that if they choose to be, and I know we can talk a little bit about that, but it also allows your patients to see a side of you that's not dental clinical. And with social media is one of the biggest things in the world today, because people want to know more about people and not just the technical, whatever it is, the widget that they sell or the clinical aspect of what they can do. So I'm a dentist out in the YouTube video audience and saying to myself, how would I get involved in cause marketing? What's the easiest, the simplest thing that I can do, that kind of the path of maybe least resistance?
Well, and the key to success with it is that everybody needs to win. These are cross-sector partnerships, as they're called. And that's probably a topic for another meeting as well. But the quickest, easiest way to benefit, for everyone to benefit, is to simply agree to change your communication with your new patients to the effect that, Mr. New Patient, your treatment today is $210, you'll learn about us that we're very committed to supporting our local community, and that's why we've made a concerted effort to regularly support the XYZ Foundation. Or you may have a list of causes. And what we'd like to do is ask if you'd like to match a donation. It can be $50, and we'll waive your treatment today. So the person does the math. Well, I can pay $210 today, or I can pay $50 today. In fact, the practice doesn't get anything. They're even matching the donation. Now, if you take the short view, that may look like a losing proposition, but think about the amazing impact this has in terms of relationship, communication, and trust. You know, because you've heard from patients, and for every patient you hear it from, you're not hearing it from probably 10, is a big treatment, a big procedure. They're wondering, well, gee, I guess this is going to fund my doctor's vacation to Florida this year. When the communication is that you're going to waive the fee on their first appointment and you're going to match a donation, they're coming out ahead, and they also know, well, this practice is a little bit different than what I thought. It seems to me that their uppermost concern is making a difference in the community. And when it comes time to accepting treatment, you better believe that you're going to have a much easier time with it, because they know that you're a good guy or a good gal, and you set the tone for a very positive relationship based on trust.
Danny, that concept is beyond brilliant. It really is. For dentists who say, you know what, I'm interested in staging, how would they stage a successful event? What is that?
Sure. Well, it's really simple, as most things are, and then the challenge is in the details. But if you want to have a successful event, and obviously the benefit of that is you're going to meet new people, you're going to cement relationships with existing people. You want to ensure that people come to the event, and once they're there, you want to make sure that they're glad that they came. So that's the key. Now, to do that, you want to give yourself as much lead time as possible, for one thing, so nobody's crazed or rushed. And, it's been said that if you want to go far, you go as a team. If you want to go fast, you go alone. Well, we want to go far. So you need to enroll the support of your team in this effort. So the first thing you do is have a kickoff meeting where, it might even go back to, well, let's vet the causes. What causes do you think we should support, or which cause would be best? The team have got to have buy-in, and you also want to make sure that it resonates with your community. So you agree on the who you're going to support, and then you agree on the what and the when, which is, when are we going to have our event? Where's it going to be? What's the theme going to be? And what are we going to do when we're there? So that's all about food, prizes, entertainment. And, even if it's not convenient for you to do a live event, I think you've all heard of Zoom, because certainly you're on it right now, at least we are. Zoom meetings are a wonderful way to have virtual parties. Are they as much fun? You know what? They can be. I've had groups that have had virtual parties where they've had contests for the best recipe, and people send in recipes, and then they have a panel of judges, or they have a best costume contest. And you can still send prizes, you can still have themes, you can certainly still have entertainment. You can have a magician, a comedian, music, and actually, it's ironic, but one thing I didn't realize until I started doing Zoom meetings, in a way they're a little bit more intimate, certainly than classroom setup. I'm thinking in terms of like my Toastmasters meetings, but when you have that gallery view, everybody's looking at everybody all the time, right? When you're in a party, you can kind of get isolated. You can be by yourself. You can be just looking at one person. There's actually, it's ironic, but it may be two-dimensional, but at least you're seeing people. And so, you want to play to the strengths. Really, the ability to have a successful event, whether virtual or in person, is only limited by your talent, creativity, and energy, and commitment to helping your cause.
Tell us what you think what can they expect as kind of the payoff for doing cause event marketing as a dentist?
Well, the payoffs are quite simply that your team love you. They love working. Study after study has shown that a big reason that people join or stay with a company is their commitment to doing something that's bigger than the organization. So team retention, motivation, that's a huge payoff. As I've mentioned, you're cementing relationships with patients of record. You are generating more referrals, because remember we talked about that word of mouth situation where a person broke his tooth and asked his buddy if his dentist was any good. Well, this is sad news to lots of people, but that's the typical way that word of mouth works. It's not typically a patient arbitrarily in conversation saying, you know what, you should go to my dentist, she's terrific. It just doesn't come up. This is an exception. My dentist is having a party, and it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. We were going to go out anyway. We're going to meet some new people. We were going to spend a few bucks anyhow. Why don't we just go? All right, so that's how it gets generated. That's another benefit. You also can position yourself as a coveted media darling, if you'd like, because the media like good news stories too. And if you do a press release and you invite them to attend it for free, that creates a buzz. You also benefit by having a reason to talk to your local merchants. Local merchants will support your cause, and it won't cost you hardly any money, if any money, because they're looking for a new audience for their offering, service, or product, whatever it is. You talk to a hair care salon, I don't know, we keep going back on hair, I guess we have envy. But you go to a salon and say, look, we're going to have a party, we're expecting 100 people. If you would like to provide for our goodie bag stuffer a discount or a coupon, or maybe offer a free makeover to a winner of a contest, that would be great. And just help us co-promote, and we'll get you in front of these people. So it's all win-win. And I could go on, but you just want to think in terms of, well, if I'm expecting someone to do something for me, what am I going to be doing for them?
As I said many times, you and I are two peas in a pod. We have many of our members who over the years have created phenomenal events, always centered around a cause. And some of the biggest and best events, the dentist didn't even have any mechanism for there was no new patient form, there was nothing. And yet one of them was actually called the Senior Snowball Dance, but the snowball effect of these is amazing. The team members, as you said, love being part of this, and part of the office and the team that does these things. The patients appreciate that you're doing it. So with that...
Well, before we get off, just one last suggestion about it, which is you can offer a free attendance, but you can also ask for a donation. But the way to make this work as a practice builder, first of all, you can get a free registration site that links from your website, because when you're doing the promotions, you should drive people to your website, and on the home page, then they click, because we want to make them aware of your brand. But if you're going to ask for a donation, all you can say is that every dollar that you donate will be matched as a discount at your next or your first visit at our office. So now, again, it's another way of supporting the charity and making sure that you're sharing the load.
Love that. And if you don't have any cap in mind, you could say up to $10,000. Of course, I don't think any dentist would do that, but I love that. So tell us about Climb for a Cause and the Smile Tree.
Sure. Well, we practice what we preach, and I first got involved in philanthropy. I think it was, I like to call it an example of sibling rivalry run amok. I mentioned earlier to my brother was and is a practicing dentist, and he had supported the dental clinic at a local multi-service social organization in Chicago area where I live. And, not being a dentist, I couldn't offer that, but I approached them and said, hey, how would you like if I staged an event for you to create awareness and generate funds? And I'd never done it before, and they said, sure. And in 5 months, we had the first run for the Ark. We had 600 people show up, and we raised something like $40,000. And so I knew I really enjoyed doing this. And several years later, through working with Linda Miles, who's a mentor of mine, she said, well, you really ought to focus on the dental field, because that's where your contacts are, and I know you're passionate about dentistry. So since 1998, we created Climb for a Cause. Dentists Climb for a Cause is the name of the foundation. And every year we stage an event people participate in. It's an arduous hike. People need to commit to raising funds. They can have a party if they want, or they need not. And this year will be our 24th annual. But we realized shortly going in there that not every dentist wants to climb a mountain to raise money for charity. And so in 2010, we created the Smile Tree, which offers every dental practice around North America the opportunity to, as we like to say, branch out and leave a smile as a branch office of the Smile Tree, where all you do is commit to supporting one of our oral health education and treatment projects that we support overseas and domestically. And in exchange for that, we support your efforts. We'll help you with the event management organization. We'll do press releases for you. That's our way of giving back. And we've definitely got benefit from that, and I'm not ashamed to say. This was a message that, Howard Ferran joined us on 2 of our climbs. I've met lots of, high energy individuals, high profile individuals. I did it for the right reason, and to date, we've raised $14 million in equivalent care for oral health education and treatment across the world.
Unbelievable.
Treating something like 45,000 children and counting. So that's a little bit about it, and I think there's people can find out more about it if they want by looking at the links below.
Congratulations on that. And we're going to put the links to that and a few other things that you've mentioned so far. So for the viewers, do look at the links in the description below. I know you've been a big proponent of the importance of organizational skills development. You came up with the phrase "master of the 4Ds" for organization. Can you talk to us about the 4Ds?
Yeah, I'd love to. I will share that by nature I don't consider myself a particularly organized person, but at least I knew I knew my weaknesses, and I knew that to excel and prosper I would need to become a master of organization. And what further motivated me to share it with other people was that I've seen so many highly talented individuals who, but because of a lack of organization skills, did not achieve their full potential. And that's why I do have a workshop that I offer on how to do this. I think dentists and their teams benefit greatly because, they depend on their practice management system, which is frankly, I'm sure you'll agree, that's a misnomer. It's not really practice management, it's patient management. And when it comes to communicating with vendors and referral sources and marketing, anything outside of the patient relationship, they really don't have the skills. Just briefly, because again, this could take up a lot of time, I like to suggest that people think about mastering the 4 Ds of organization. And those 4 Ds are to do, defer, delegate, or discard. And of course, how to decide which bucket each task that you're confronted with falls depends on a protocol. It's a matrix really where you decide, well, is it urgent? Is it important? Or is it in my zone of genius? And I thank you for sharing that phrase for me. I talked about whether it was, something that you were a master of. One key to success is to focus on what you're best at. And I don't mean it's the thing that you are better at than anybody else. And for most dentists, that's dentistry. And for most dentists who are focusing on sedation dentistry or treatment of obstructive sleep apnea, that's what they should focus on, and they should work on their associate doing the other procedures. But if you can just walk away with thinking about, well, is this something that's urgent or is it just important? If it's important but not urgent, then I don't need to do it right away. If it's not urgent and not important, then you should discard it because you'll probably never need to do it. In terms of delegating, it depends on whether you have resources available and whether it falls into your zone of genius. And whether you have, but even there, if you're consistently seeing that you're being forced to do something that you really wouldn't like to do, that may represent an opportunity to grow your team, to bring on the resources that you need so that you can focus on what you're best at.
Awesome. And yes, you are 100% correct that we could all benefit, especially dentistry gets so crazy busy and so much into the minutia that you need to be able to focus and organize. So love the 4Ds. Before we close...
Well, I like to say that the 2 most important pieces of equipment that you have in your office are your scanner and your shredder. I can't tell you how many health partners, they don't know what color their desk is because it's just strewn with paper. And I know there are some very successful, brilliant people that have big messes in their offices, but until you've experienced a clear desk with no paper, you really don't know if, in fact, you're living the way, an optimal lifestyle.
I love that concept. Before we close, tell the viewers what else is new and exciting at AIM Dental Marketing.
I talked about patient testimonial videos, and that's not new, but we're really motivated and energized to encourage people to do it. And as an adjunct to our telephone skills coaching, we're partnering with a couple of improvisation specialists, one of whom is Jim Messier, and those of you baseball fans may know. Jim's a World Series ring-holding pitcher, relief pitcher. He played for the A's, the Yankees, and the Marlins. And he and his partner, Ellen Schnurr, have come up with this improv talk module, because it takes a step back, because telephone skills is key, and creating an environment that's conducive to connecting with first-time callers to schedule appointments is critical. But what really is necessary as a foundational element is that every team member feels a sense of agency and ownership and stake in the success of the business. And through this interactive session that we do, we either do it on Zoom or in person, we go through various exercises that help people to sort of identify what might be holding them back and how maybe they're not acting as the true team player that they want to be because of certain mindsets, thoughts that they have. Jim and Ellen talk about the concept which is prevalent in improv, which is the concept of yes and. Whatever situation you're confronted with, you can shoot it down and say, no, that won't work, or have a no but attitude, or you can say, yes, and let's do this. So it's about being a well-oiled machine, but having the skills to work with your team, to roll with whatever punches you're confronted, to let go of the past. Jim Messier has a great story where he talks about one of his teammates who struck out. And when he was out in the field, he was still, beating himself up for having struck out, and he committed an error, and the A's lost a very important game because of it. And what Jim realized was that, this guy was, he was kind of being selfish because he was wallowing in his own misery about what had happened, and you can't do anything about it. So we talk about, through role play and other fun exercises, how to deal with your inner drill sergeant and how to address whether you're suffering from imposter syndrome, which if you are, no, you're not alone. In fact, the only people who don't are narcissists, serious narcissists, presidents of countries, hygienists, dentists, yours truly. At some point in our life, we've all questioned whether we're really, when we're really the real article. But just know that that's common, and it's not true. So that's something we're very excited about, and I'm happy to share, more about that. How we teach people to avoid the fight, flee, and freeze mindsets, and when you do that, when you can avoid that mindset, you're never really stupid again, because it's a stupefying mind state that you're in. But when you're not in it, then you're not really stupid. You're empowered, and you can be the most that you can be.
Danny, this has been beyond amazing. You've delivered more than I ever could have anticipated. Again, for the viewers, you can reach Danny and AIM Marketing by the links in the description below. I do hope that we can rope you into coming back again and doing this.
I'll be happy to, Tom. So it was a lot of fun.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much, and take care.
You too.
Because you stayed to the end, I have a gift for you. How would a $300,000 increase in annual revenue change your practice? How might it change your life? Over the last 20 years, Elizabeth and I have made Freedom Summit, aka GG12 Coaching, available for dentists who demonstrate their commitment to serving your patients at the highest level, creating an environment where team members thrive and a level of practice that rewards you with the financial freedom and the lifestyle about which you've only dreamed. Your journey begins with one step, the roadmap to success. This is a process through which you'll learn about your practice and the hidden opportunities right under your feet. During the Roadmap to Success journey, we'll be able to point out specific untapped opportunities in your practice and dive deep into the details, including the as-of-yet untapped financial potential of your practice. Your gift? After our analysis of your practice, you'll have a 90-minute complimentary one-on-one Roadmap to Success consultation. It's during that consultation that you'll gain a clear vision of what Freedom Summit can do for you. And at that point, we'll be able to make a determination as to whether or not we feel that your practice is a good match for the program. If we agree that there's interest and opportunity and that we're a good fit for each other, we'll invite you to complete an application to the program. Regardless of the result of that meeting, you'll know exactly where in your practice the biggest opportunities lay waiting to be mined. Following your complimentary Roadmap to Success consultation, you'll receive a detailed step-by-step written analytic report. If you'd like to get the very most out of your practice and your life, as well as create financial freedom for yourself and for your family, take your very first step on your complimentary Roadmap to Success. Learn how Freedom Summit coaching could change your lifestyle and your life. Go to www.gems12.com. That's GEMS and then the numeral 12.com. There's a link in the description below. And remember, you're only one gem away.